welcome back to my channel. Today we are talking how to write good realistic characters. For me, characters and writing their arcs and their feelings and just making them feel like people is one of my favorite parts of the writing process. And also one of my favorite things about reading is being able to really see yourself in a character and relate. It's just really beautiful to see, characters grow and go through things. It can be really relatable and real and inspirational or comforting, or that was weirdly sappy. Anyways, character is one of my favorite parts of the writing process, so I just thought that today I would sit down and share my best and my favorite tips for writing characters that feel real. My first tip is to give your character a well-developed backstory that still affects them to this day. Too often, I feel like I read a book where a character had a really, traumatic, if you will, backstory or upbringing or some sort of big event that happened in their life, and it just feels like nothing remains, or maybe they're a little bit gloomy and depressed or something. But I feel like with real people, the way that you are raised, the way that you grow up, your backstory really does affect you still to this day, and it might not be in that stereotypical way that we sometimes see in fiction where something just traumatic will happen to a character and then they'll just lay in bed for months, which that can totally happen. But I think a lot of the time it gives you, trust issues, it warps your reality, it really affects your beliefs. So just make sure that your character has a well-developed, well-rounded backstory. Give them some good memories along with the bad, and just make sure that it affects their beliefs and how they see the world and how they interact with other people. For example, in my book June Gloom, which is not out yet, so nobody knows what I'm talking about, but one of my main characters, her name's Maisie, her parents didn't want her when she was a baby. Not funny. Just a little bit dramatic, of course. The character's always an orphan. They didn't really want to have a family, so they ended up giving her to her dad's sister. So Maisie has grown up in a very loving environment. Her aunt is great. She doesn't feel the lack of being loved, but what she does feel is she feels always out of place. People don't really truly accept her. They really love her every flaw and all of her, quirks and things. She's a little bit scared to be herself, for fear that people might leave her. And also her main belief, which gets her in a lot of trouble in the story, is that she just really wants someone to love her and someone to see her, and she doesn't exactly care who that person is. The moment that she feels seen and feels understood and feels loved, she latches on. And that comes from the way that she was raised. She says in the book that it doesn't affect her, but we can see that it does. And then I could kind of give an example like that for most of my characters. There's something in their upbringing that kind of changed or affects the way that they see the world and the way that they act and the way that they talk to people and the way that they have relationships and all of that. So give them a well-developed backstory that still affects them to this day. And maybe that's not the typical my parents died and now I never go out in public and I never speak to anyone. That's a little bit dramatic, and from what I have seen in the world with friends and just people going through things, that's not really that realistic. Usually they'll just go on with normal life, but there'll be something about them that has been changed and that, is affected. My next tip is your character should never be perfect. Something that I used to struggle with when I was younger was kind of self-inserting, which I will say I don't think that there's anything really wrong with self-inserting. Maybe not fully, completely a YN situation, but maybe, again, using my characters for example, I am a writer, obviously, and I'm an introvert and I love music, I gave those traits to Maisie. And then I really love books and I really love animals, and I'm also pretty hard-headed, and I will fight someone for like what I believe in, not physically, but I'll like, you know, stand up for myself. And I gave those traits to Virginia, another character. So I don't feel like there's anything wrong with inserting little kind of traits about yourself into your characters. That's one of the ways I feel like I bring them to life and helps me understand them. I don't think that I have the same fatal flaw, if you will, of Maisie like desperately wanting someone to love her. I understand that feeling, but I don't think that's my worldview. So I think that self-inserting a little bit is fine, but maybe not entirely, because when I was younger and I would do this, I would be so afraid to write my characters doing bad things and making mistakes and being stupid and being annoying, like people are, because I didn't want people to see me that way. So if self-inserting or kind of being afraid that people are gonna see you in your characters, try and let that fear go. Let your characters be imperfect, let them make mistakes, let them be annoying sometimes, let them be stupid sometimes, let them make dumb decisions, let them be human, even though they're words on a paper. Don't be afraid of somebody reading your book and you being like, that was a dumb decision, that character's annoying, whatever. Like, people are always gonna have opinions, but at the end of the day, I have read so many books and watched so many movies and just consumed so much media where I see myself in a character, and while everyone else is, you know, yelling at how annoying they are and how they can't stand them, I feel seen and represented by them. There are always gonna be people that hate and hold your characters to such a high standard. I don't know, because when I read, I'm not like thinking like, oh my god, that was so annoying and crazy. I'm more thinking like, what's this gonna do for the plot? Like, I'm there to be entertained. I don't know, I don't really understand when people say like, that character's so annoying and why would they do that? Why would they do that? They're clearly doing it for the plot. Hello. It's the whole point. Anyway, don't be afraid of people judging your characters, and don't like put too much of yourself into it. Don't be so like invested and attached that you don't allow them to go off the rails sometimes. That's fun. My next piece of advice is to, after they make dumb mistakes and are stupid, give them actual consequences for their actions. Something else that I feel like I have seen occasionally is an author does let their characters make a mistake or make a dumb decision, or maybe be a little, you know, immature, be a little arrogant, be a little rash, but then like they never get any consequences, like, because they're the main character, nothing like ever really bad happens to them. Like, I feel like in romance novels, like, you know, the third act breakup, and it's just like, somehow these characters hurting each other always ends up like working out, and they're like in like a grand love confession, they're like, I love you for all your flaws and you are perfect and whatever, which that's fine. If you're writing a rom-com, that's part of the genre, but I'm just using that as an example. Everything should not always work out for your main character. Let bad things happen to them. Let, you know, there be consequences for their actions. My next tip is to give them insecurities / things that they can grow from. This is kind of just like the general idea of a character arc is, you know, your character starting in one place and ending up in another. Again, I'm gonna use my characters as an example, which, by the way, I'm not claiming that like I am the best writer ever and like these are perfect examples, but this is like how I have used these tips in my own writing. Maisie, with her fear of people seeing her but wanting people to see her, you know, she meets someone and he sees her, and she ends up, you know, realizing that it's not that scary actually to let people, you know, in and let them see you and let them know you, and, you know, let them hurt you, let them leave you. The right people will stay. Give them like insecurities or a fatal flaw, or, you know, back to the backstory point, give them, you know, with that thing, whatever that thing is, you know, their worldview, their fatal flaw, whatever, give them room to grow and room to learn a lesson. I feel like the books that have stuck with me the most are books where the character learns a lesson about life, about themselves, and it just makes you think about yourself and think about your life, think about your relationships, and that just makes your characters feel really real and makes your story really impactful. My next tip is, as they grow and change and learn their lesson, they should be internally fighting with themselves. It shouldn't just be like one day they wake up and they're like, oh my god, I've learned this lesson. There should be a lot of internal push and pull and doubts and, moments where they're all in on this new life perspective. I don't know how to explain this. All in, and then the next day they're scared and having doubts, because when we as people are learning and growing and discovering new things about life and figuring stuff out, I feel like there's a lot of push and pull, and there's moments where you're like, I'm gonna live like this from now on, and then like a few hours later you're like, no, I want to go back to the comfort, bring me back to my comfort zone. And I feel like there's a push and there's a pull until eventually something sticks, either proving your fears right and you retreat back into yourself, or proving your fears wrong, and then that's the moment where, the eye-opening lesson learning moment. So give your characters some internal conflict, some internal push and pull while they're growing and while they're learning. This will make them more relatable, and also it'll make the story more interesting, because the reader will be like, where is this gonna go? They don't seem like fully on board with this. Are they gonna come around? It just makes, your readers think. My next piece of advice is to, and this is gonna sound really crazy and mean, exploit their weaknesses. If your character is gonna go through a learning, growing lesson, then there needs to be at least one incident or several incidents where their comfort zone is challenged, where they're pushed outside, what they feel safe doing, where their insecurities and their biggest fears are brought to life. That's how you learn a lesson, is, realizing that there might be something wrong with the way that you are interacting. So put their fears and their weaknesses center stage spotlight, and then push them to do something about it. My next tip is to give them moments of vulnerability, some moments where they open up about their fears, maybe to someone else. Maybe if your character is like the type of person who doesn't even admit their flaws or their fears to themselves, maybe have a moment where they can't deny it anymore. They admit it to themselves and they admit that they need to change. Or even if it's not the big knowing you need to change moment, give them some moments where they open up to themselves, to the reader in the internal monologue, or to a friend, to a loved one. Give them a moment of weakness, a moment of vulnerability. This makes them very easy to root for if you understand where they're coming from, if you understand their fear. This is also the moment where, when you're a reader, when that character is venting, when they're opening up, and then you're reading it, you're like, oh, that's very me. That's the moment of connection with the reader. Or even if you don't relate to a character, you're like, oh, that's why they do that. It just makes it really easy to root for them and understand them and why they do the things that they do when you have that vulnerability moment. And also if they're venting, or maybe they're crying about something, that makes them feel human and realistic, and they're afraid, and that can really resonate with your reader. My last and final tip is a little bit more of a lighthearted one. Give your characters a unique way of speaking, of thinking, of processing. This is especially a important thing to remember if you're writing a dual POV or a multiple POV story. You should be able to tell the difference between each character. There should be a difference in how your characters are thinking, how they're processing their internal monologue. If you just have one main character, still give them a unique voice, a unique way of thinking and processing and seeing the world. I'm gonna do one last example from my book. My book is dual POV, but not in a romance way. it's in both of the main girls' POVs, and they both have like different storylines going on, and then it's all connected with the main plot of the book with the band and the friend group, all of that. And in Maisie's POV, she's very much of like an overthinker, and also kind of likes to psychoanalyze people. So, you know, she'll notice somebody doing something in the corner and she'll have like a couple sentences of thoughts of maybe why they're doing that. Meanwhile, Virginia, the other POV, she doesn't, you know, notice the little things about people. Virginia focuses a lot more on feelings. Maisie's a very thought-focused person. Virginia's a feelings person. You know, if somebody is rubbing her the wrong way, she'll have like a single paragraph that's one word, and it'll be like asshole. Like she's thinking in her head that that person's an asshole. Things are very much more black and white to Virginia, very much more complicated to Maisie. So I feel like there is a pretty big difference between them, and when you're reading a chapter in Maisie's POV, it's very different from when you're reading a chapter in Virginia's POV. Just the way that they are seeing the world and seeing the situation. By doing this, first of all, it makes it less confusing for your reader when reading, you know, to have each of your characters have a unique vision, a unique voice, and a unique way of talking, and a unique way of seeing everything. And also it makes your characters feel more real, because every single human being on the planet sees the world in a different way and processes things in a different way and speaks in a different way and has different thought patterns and all of that. So take that into consideration when you're writing. Like, how would your character describe this situation? How would they process the situation? Not necessarily how you would process the situation, but how would they? Alright, that is all of the tips that I have for you today. I hope they were helpful. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Please give the video a like if you did like it. Also, please comment your thoughts on the video, your thoughts on any of the things that I brought up, you know, any of your own advice that you have to writing realistic characters. Just, you know, help each other out. Also, let me know any videos that you want to see from me, anything you want me to talk about. If you want, you could subscribe. I post bookish content, writing tips and tricks, obviously, writing vlogs, updates on my writing journey, reading vlogs, book recommendations, all sorts of things bookish and things like that. Thanks again for watching, and I hope you have a really great day.